There we go. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody. It is an honor to be with you. I am and speak quite often on marriage and family. I'm a marriage and family strategist at LifeWay Christian Resources, so I'm a marriage and family guy, and I'm sure a lot of you receive marital information. When I was in college, it was all about getting married, right? I promise you I will not talk to you about getting married today, okay? I was 30 when I got married, and married to my beautiful wife, Christy. We have 2 kiddos, ages 4 and 2. Today, what I want to talk to you instead about are relationships in general, but specifically your heart. And the title of the talk today is Missing Out. Every single one of us is missing out on something, and we have to choose what we miss out on, and we have to make sure that we choose wisely, because the culture tells us that we're missing out, and so this perpetual chase to make sure that we don't miss out. When Christy and I first started dating, we were about 4 months into our dating relationship, and I figured what better way to figure out if this was the woman I was supposed to marry than to invite her with me to Louisiana. I was in a friend's wedding in Louisiana, and I thought, I'll introduce her to my friends, my closest friends, and get to really, they can get to know her and that kind of thing. And so we went there, and I was in the wedding, and I remember I was playing 500 with my friends, with the guys that were in the wedding. And if you're not familiar with 500, it's where you take a football and you throw it to the one end, and the other guys are standing there, and the person throwing the football yells out a number, and whatever that number is, whoever catches it gets that many points, and the first one to 500 gets to go be the quarterback and throw the football. Well, I was on the receiving end of another guy who was, I went up against this one guy who was huge, and I went up against him, and the football bounced off the end of my pinky finger, and it like jammed my pinky finger. And so, I mean, it was hurting me pretty badly, and I was like even like trying to pull it out. I thought I jammed it, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, I cannot let them know I hurt my pinky finger. So the next throw comes, and I forget, it was like 100 points or something, and I caught it, and I got to be the quarterback. So I go there, it's on my right hand, I'm right-handed, and I go to throw the football, and as I stepped back to throw the football, and I threw it, it rolled off the end of my finger, and it just went about 10 feet in front of me. And I'm like, guys, I cannot do this. My finger is killing me. So I go inside where my wife is sitting with the bridesmaids and the ladies, and she's literally sitting right by the refrigerator, and I had to go get ice for it. So I walk in, and my wife is from Canada. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Canadians, but they usually will go to a hockey rink to watch a fight, and every now and again a hockey game will break out. So my wife looks at me and she says, she was my girlfriend at the time, she looked at me and she says, "Did you hurt it, or are you just being a baby?" And I'm going, wow. And so I got ice, and over the course of the weekend, by the time we got back to Virginia where we lived, I went to the doctor and he said, "You need surgery." I literally broke the knuckle, and had I not had surgery with pins in it, I would have been drinking tea like this the rest of my life. It's like Dr. Evil, you know? And so fast forward to our wedding day, she says to me, the only thing, you have one thing just this entire wedding day, please don't break anything. Don't break anything. So I'm like, all right, I got this. So it's the day before the wedding. We're at wedding rehearsal. It's right before wedding rehearsal. Christy's dad, my father-in-law, takes us to Port Stanley. It's this beach area along Lake Erie. And I'm sitting there with my best man. He's the man who married us as well. And we're going over our wedding vows, and we're going over the wedding ceremony. And I remember it very vividly. It was 4:20 in the afternoon, and Christy's dad comes over. All the other guys are out on the beach playing football and volleyball and that kind of thing. And he comes over and he says, "Guys, we only have 10 minutes left before we have to leave. We have to go to wedding rehearsal." And I looked at my buddy Sean, and I'm like, what could happen in 10 minutes, right? So we step out onto the beach, wrap up everything we're doing. Sean takes the football, I take off my shoes, and the guy whose wedding I was in Louisiana goes out for a pass. He's now in my wedding. He goes out for a pass. I go out to defend him, break up the pass. Great, everything's good. He says, "No, I want one more shot." So Christy's dad picks up the football, so I blame him for this. He picks up the football, my father-in-law. This is the last one, he says. I go out for a pass. Remember, we're in bare feet. I'm trailing my friend. His foot comes back. My foot goes forward. His heel hits my foot, and down I go. And I look down, and it's my pinky toe. And I mean, that thing all of a sudden just started to turn black. And I am scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, you cannot tell Christy this happened. So I get my foot into a dress shoe, and we go through rehearsal, and I don't tell her at all. By the next morning, the night before my wedding, I was scared. I had butterflies in my stomach, and it wasn't because I was getting married. It was because all I could think about were the pins that were sticking out of my pinky finger, and we were leaving the next day for our honeymoon. And so the wedding photographer, everybody's in on this, and nobody's telling Christy the entire wedding day. There was only one point in our wedding day where Christy says, "Are you limping?" And the wedding photographer jumped in and said, "No, he's not limping. Get over here. We have pictures to take." And so she did not know our entire wedding day. The next morning, I have a flip-flop on, and I show her, and I confess. And I said, "Christy, I have a confession to make. I broke my pinky toe yesterday." No lie. She looks at me, and she says, "You started our marriage on a foundation of lies." So that was the beginning of my wedding story. Though that lie in particular wasn't something that hindered our marriage, there are lies today that we have in our marriage that impact our relationship. There are lies that I believe that are impacting my relationship with my kids and how present I am with my kids. And there are lies that I believe today that are impacting my relationship with Jesus, most importantly. And I think at the core of every one of these lies is the fear of missing out. And it's something that's pervasive in our culture today. I didn't have a cell phone until after I was out of college. So I don't even know what it was like growing up with technology. And yet it is the very thing today that I believe is perpetuating the fear of missing out. In John 10:10, I love John 10:10, it says, "The enemy has come to steal, kill, and destroy." A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. A thief. Now think about this in relation to a thief. Any relationship where love is present, the enemy wants to steal it. The enemy wants to destroy it. Any relationship you have, he wants to destroy it and kill it and steal it. And he works subtly. He works so subtly because that's what a thief does. Often you don't even realize what's missing. Because that's how thieves work, like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, conniving and sneaking. And what I believe he's using today more than any other tool to steal, kill, and destroy is this. This is not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about technology. We're talking about our hearts and what we're really missing out on. I want to cover 7 lies that I believe the enemy is telling us through these devices that's causing us to miss out on what matters most in our lives. Lies that we believe about success, but are actually making us less successful. Lies that we believe keep us connected, but are actually disconnecting us more than we realize. And I don't have time to go into all the neurological research, but just understand this. As we cover each lie, when you wire your brain for screens, it becomes wired for screens. When you wire it for relationships, it becomes wired for relationships. Contrary to popular belief, John 10:10 says that it's Jesus, not our phones, that have come that we may have life and have it abundantly. However, our culture would tell us otherwise. And I believe there's this pervasive sense when I talk about lies that are in our marriage and lies that are in my relationship with my kids and lies that I'm believing that are impacting my relationship with Jesus. I believe there's this underlying sense, and we can't put words to it, and you might be feeling it, but it's this underlying sense that I'm just not as alive as I wish I could be. My life maybe isn't feeling as abundant as maybe I wish it could be. Or maybe my loved ones aren't feeling that life and that vibrancy and that abundance the way that they could be. Before I jump into the 7 lies, I want to just briefly explain an illustration to help you understand that I'm not against technology. How many of you in here do not drive a car because you think they're absolutely evil? Raise your hand. Awesome, nobody. I've never had anybody raise their hand. I don't know what I would do if I did. Cars are good things. They get us from point A to point B. They were first developed in 1908 by Henry Ford, mass-produced by 1913. Do you know what year standard disc brakes were introduced onto the automobile? It was 1949. And then 1959 were 3-point seat belts. 1964 were padded dashboards. Today we have airbags. It took 41 years for standard disc brakes to be introduced onto the automobile. Cars are great things, but without brakes, without safety measures, they will take our physical lives. Technology is no different. I just pray that it doesn't take 41 years for us to realize that we need to put brakes on it, or my fear is that we will lose the emotional and spiritual lives of an entire generation. And again, I won't go into all the research today. However, the research, when you study the research, think about this. Do you know how old the iPad is? In April, we will celebrate the iPad's 7th birthday. The iPad is only 3 years older than my son. Hasn't even been around that long. Lie number 1. Lie number 1. What is our phone telling us? What are the lies that our technology is telling us? Lie number 1 is that you are the master. You are the master. Let me ask this question, though. When was the last time you fasted from technology? I teach a course at Liberty University called on addictions. And one of the assignments that I had students do early on in that class, the very first thing is I had them write down on a piece of paper what they turned to when they were hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and bored. It's kind of classic addiction stuff. When you're feeling hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and bored, what do you turn to? Some people it's chocolate, some people it's caffeine, some people it's drugs or alcohol. A lot of us today turn to this. And I want you to remember, and then what I had them do is I had them fast from that one thing for the entire semester, the entire 16-week semester, and I had them write a log in a journal of what it was like to feel relapse or to experience that. Because until you really truly feel what it's like to be addicted to something, it's hard to empathize with somebody who is. But I believe in our generation, we are an addicted culture. This is dopamine. We're giving drugs to our children today. And what's happening for each of us, and I want to ask this one phrase. I want to say this one phrase, and I want you to think about this in terms of whether you are a master or a slave to your technology. Anything you cannot fast from owns you. Anything you cannot fast from owns you. So in this lie that you are the master, think about today fasting 24 hours every week from your phone. My wife and I have a 24-hour fast from Saturday sundown to Sunday sundown, where we put the phones away. Now, I know and understand that their phone is the only thing that you have and you need it for communication, but use it only as a phone. Get rid of the social media for 24 hours, get off of the texting. You don't need to answer everybody every single second. 24 hours. So that you become the master rather than the slave to the phone. My hunch is that we are not as free as we believe that we are. I'm telling you, this is a problem for me. This is a message for me. I'm not speaking to you today. I'm speaking to me. I see how it impacts me, and we set limits in our home. Lie number 2, you need me to get ahead. The next lie is you need me to get ahead. I don't know if you realize this or not, but the chief technology officer of eBay, as well as executives at Google, Yahoo, Apple, and HP, all send their kids. They live in the Silicon Valley, and they got this group of executives. They send their kids to a 9-classroom school where technology is completely omitted. Think about that. Bill Gates has 3 daughters. He only allowed his daughters on the internet for 45 minutes a day, and they weren't allowed to have a cell phone until they turned 13. And once they did turn 13 and get a cell phone, they were only allowed to use it as a cell phone. Steve Jobs did not allow his children to have an iPad. If the people who are creating these devices are protecting their children, what do they know about it that we don't? I believe, and this links back to what we're missing out on. Think about this, what we're missing out on. We believe that it makes us, that we need it to get ahead, that it's going to help us to get ahead. And in some aspects it does. But there was one particular study that put people in a room with nothing but their thoughts. And the goal of the study was to see how long an individual could stay in that room with nothing but their thoughts. Oh, by the way, the only way that they could get out was to give themselves an electrical shock. Do you know what the average length of time that somebody stayed in that room was? This was just 2 years ago, about 1.5 years ago, this study. The average length of time, 6 minutes before they gave themselves an electrical shock to get out. Now think about that. Yet, research shows it takes at least 15 to 20 minutes of boredom for creativity and imagination to kick into your brain. At least 15 to 20 minutes of boredom where you're doing nothing, and you're just being bored. I don't know about you, but I know for me, I have to schedule boredom. If not, I take this with me. You're waiting in line, what are you doing? What are we doing? We're on this. And it's slowly and subtling. I'm talking about a thief here who is subtle and conniving. And I'm not saying this is a tool of the enemy. I believe he's using it as one, because it's the socially acceptable way for us to distance ourselves from relationships, and particularly from Jesus. Be bored. Schedule time for boredom. Because creativity and imagination will be what get you ahead in life. Lie number 3, you are more productive with me. One research study, you are more productive with me. One research study took a group of students, brightest students at Stanford and Harvard universities, and before the study, they asked them, with multitasking, would you be more productive or less productive with multitasking? And every single student at Harvard and Stanford in the study said, I will be more productive by multitasking. What they found at the end of the study was there was not one student that was more productive by multitasking. In fact, as a whole, they were less productive by up to 1/3. Now think about this for a second. Let's just hypothetically say you have a paper you're working on a Word document, and you have your email client up at the same time. We don't have the TV going, we don't have our cell phones near us, so let's pretend there's not even near us. Let's pretend we put our cell phone in another room, we have the TV turned off, and all we have on is our email client and a Word document, and we're working on a paper. And all of a sudden you get a ding because an email comes in, and you leave your paper and you go to the email, and you take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to answer the email. By the time you come back to the paper, you have to re-engage your brain to get started again. Sequential tasking in research over and over shows that we are more productive by sequential tasking. Schedule your day to not double screen. Schedule your day one task at a time. Now, what's this have to do with missing out? Think about this. Think about what we're missing out on when we do not focus. Every task that I've given you to do, fast at least 24 hours from your cell phones each week so you can focus. Focus on your time with God. Focus on your time with those, your loved ones, your friends, your peers. Focus on the people and the souls that are important to you. Number 2, schedule time for boredom so you can be alone and be creative and imaginative. So many of you are in the arts. You understand creativity. You understand imagination. And then practice sequential tasking so we're not missing out. Lie number 4, you work hard, I will help you relax. You work hard, I will help you relax. The issue here is that, take this for a second. The word amuse, so we're exhausted, we're tired, we're at the end of our day, and I know for me, my default is to go to news applications, ESPN and others, to just sit and read. But when that becomes our default over and over, we start watching videos and we start amusing ourselves. What does amuse mean? It means to be entertained. When you take the letter A and you put it in front of a word, it negates the definition of that very word. So take off the word A from the word muse or amuse, and you have the word muse. What does the word muse mean? It means to think deeply. It means to meditate. When we amuse ourselves, we entertain ourselves, and we get away from thinking deeply. We get away from critical thinking. We get away from problem solving. And what happens is we miss out on true rest because our brains really aren't shutting down. And I believe what's happening is this, what I like to call a state of insufficiency, that we feel insufficient. It's this constant, this infinite quality or this infinite feeling, this state of being that we're never truly done with something. And I believe that's at this core. We can't really put language to it, but it's that core at the bottom. I'm not really living. I'm not really abundantly living. Because it's just like this. We were, last week, my wife and I were watching. We love, any This Is Us fans in here? We love the show This Is Us. And it's our time for my wife and I, after the kids are down, to sit down and be together. And it's one of our mindless activities that we do. But one of the things that we don't do in our home, or that we don't like to do in our home, is double screening. So watching TV while you're on your phone, because you're not truly present. You're missing out. And my wife was on her phone last week as we're doing it, as we're watching it, and there was a moment in This Is Us where I'm like, oh my gracious, and she goes, what? And I looked at her and I said, you're not with me. Like, we're not even together right now. And by the way, this isn't just her, this is me too. We have moments where this is me too. And it's like we forget, and I had to rewind it, and we went back and we had to reshare that moment. But when we are double screening or we're doing these types, we're not really focused in the moment. We're missing out in the moment. And when we're constantly amusing and amusing and amusing, our brains are not wiring themselves to focus on what really matters. I believe that the only way that we can resolve this state of insufficiency is the Sabbath. And I know the Sabbath sounds very unmodern, uncool, but the Lord is the Sabbath. He is the Sabbath, and it is the commandment to keep the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. Make it a part of your 24-hour fast. If we don't truly, you cannot truly rest and feel sufficient, feel worthy, feel alive, feel abundant, because Jesus is the one who has come that we may have life and have it abundantly. He is the Sabbath. Without spending time with Him, without focusing on Him, there will be this perpetual state of feeling like we're not living abundantly, like we're missing out. Lie number 5, this is my favorite one. I have the Bible app. The Bible is on me, so use me. I just want to pick up in 1 Kings. This is one of my favorite stories in all of Scripture. It's where Elijah is running. And see, Elijah thought that God showed up in big, big ways. That's how he'd experienced him. And when you go back to Moses, God showed up in a burning bush. He showed up in fire. And now all of a sudden, Elijah is running from the Lord. And I don't have time to get into all of it, but I'm picking it up in chapter 1 Kings 19, in verse 9. He says, suddenly the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of armies, but the Israelites have abandoned your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are looking for me to take my life. Then he said, go out and stand on the mountain in the Lord's presence. Now, what's really cool about this is Elijah goes out and he stands in a cleft of a rock, and a lot of people believe, a lot of commentators, Old Testament scholars believe he was standing at the same spot that Moses was when God shows up in a burning bush. So he says, at that moment, the Lord passed by. A great and mighty wind was tearing at the mountains and was shattering cliffs before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. Now it's shattering. Now remember, he's being protected by a rock, the rock. I love that. I love everything about this passage. But the Lord was not in the great and mighty wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a voice, a soft whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. He did the exact same thing Moses did. He hid his face. And he heard him in a whisper. Are our lives quiet enough that we could hear God if he were whispering to us? Have we quieted ourselves enough that we could hear him if he whispered to us? I think today, a lot of us, me included, we need to get off our phones and onto our knees. We need to be spending more time here and less time on apps and reading the news, because this is the truth. If you don't begin every single day here in truth, the world will lie to you the rest of the day. This is the truth. And we've got to get back to the basics. My goal this year is for my children to see me reading a book, this or a hardcover book, more often than they see me on this. Lie number 6 is, I will keep you connected. I will keep you connected. There was a number of research studies out there, and a lot of you are you're gonna look at this and you're gonna go, "Ah, man, we talk about millennials, and there's so much research on millennials, and one of the major research studies on millennials is that millennials are narcissistic." But there's new research out that's showing Gen IY, which is 21 and younger, Gen IY, and a lot of you probably fit this generation, that this is the generation that never knew life without cell phones. And the research is showing that unlike millennials, who were narcissistic, Gen IY, the next generation, 21 and younger, there's a massive increase in depression. And this is wet cement. This is not yet published. It's very wet cement. It's a researcher out of UCSD named Jean Twenge. She's looking at this research right now. It's almost getting ready for publication. That it is depression that is the key marker in 21 and younger. And she's linking it back to this. And again, I don't have time to go into this, but let me tell you this. Deepening healthy relationships are an antidote to depression. And I believe that the lie that we're believing today is that this will keep us connected, and it does, but it's for broadening relationships, not deepening them. So what's the action step? We have a rule in our home that there are no technology, no screens at any meal times. None, because we can tell stories. Your action step is get rid of screens at meal times. If you're out with your friends, put all the phones in the middle of the table. First one to touch their phone buys everybody's meal. Okay? Get rid of the screens at meal times. Get rid of, and instead of being on the screens, go on coffee dates. Go to lunch with a friend. Take a professor to lunch. Go with the people that God has placed in your life and deepen relationships and face-to-face eye contact. Because it leads to lie number 7. And lie number 7 is you will miss out. And it's a lie, but there's a truth. There's a truth in it because you will miss out. Because if you choose to be present with the people who God has placed in your life and be truly present, be focused, be all there with them in the moment without any distractions, if you choose to be with Jesus apart from any distractions, you're going to be missing out on a lot of things in life, but they're going to become more and more insignificant to you as you miss out on them, because what's right in front of you is going to matter all the more for you. I'm realizing this as a dad, as a young dad. I'm realizing this because I have to be honest with you. My affirmation, my sense of affirmation comes in my work. I was 30 when I got married. My 20s, I poured into education. I had my PhD before I was married. I was pouring in, I was working, and I got affirmation from achievements. And it continues to this day. And so when my son or my daughter want to play trains and Thomas the Train, or they want to have a tea party, it's very hard for me to turn everything off and sit and be present with them without feeling like I need to be checking my phone for the next task or for the next thing to be doing. But what I'm finding is that when I do, and I finally shut everything down and I'm fully present with my kids, when I lay in bed with them at night, and we go through our favorite part of our day, and I look back and I review my day, I genuinely can say that being present with them playing trains was by far my most favorite part of my day. And that running here or running there, you see, listen, our culture will tell us to do big things and go and do great and big things, and I believe that is great and we need to do that. However, if we don't begin to make our worlds smaller, focusing in on the people who God has placed in our lives, who we love, our parents, our friends, our siblings, Jesus, the local church. Get back to your local church. Get back to the community that God has placed here. When we focus on the smaller, do not despise the day of small beginnings. When we focus in on the smaller and we're all here and we're present right here, the big things will happen. God will take those big things and He will expand your territory. I have no doubt. I'm struggling with this in my own life. This is a everyday struggle for me, and I didn't grow up with technology all day, every day throughout my life. So for you guys, I don't know even, it's got to be exponentially even more. And so in all of this, give yourselves grace as you navigate this. If there's one action step that you take today, if it's the 24 hours, if it's going to lunch with a friend, if it's just getting rid of the phones more often at dinner times, pick one thing. Just pick one thing. But let me tell you, be present. Be all there. The reason I say this is because in 1993, my dad was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. I was 12 years old at the time. My dad was just 34. It was a gift. It was an unbelievable gift that God gave us, because even though my dad's health declined over the next number of years, we chose to make the most of every single moment that we had when we were together. And when I left to do graduate school in early 2000, about 2001, my dad and I started a Father's Day Phillies game, because I'm from Pennsylvania, we're huge Phillies fans. Every single year around Father's Day, I would go back and we would go to a Phillies Day game, a Father's Day game, Phillies game, every year. We made the most of every moment that we had together. We started traditions. We started pouring into one another in new ways because we just didn't know. What if every relationship were like that? Then in 2014, my dad's heart stopped working on its own, and he was rushed to the hospital. And we drove 21 hours from where we were living in Branson, Missouri, with a 6-week-old girl and a 2-year-old son, and we drove there. And when my dad came out of surgery after receiving his first heart pump, he had 3 heart pumps. When he came out after that first heart pump, and we're sitting in the ICU, he said, "Josh," he said, "when I was first diagnosed in 1993, my prayer was that I'd get to watch you kids grow up." He said, "Now I'm just asking for a bonus. I want to see my grandkids." My daughter was 6 weeks old at the time. It was the first time he met her. And I have a clip that I want to show you that we got last July. It was a moment, this is a moment of using technology for good. I observed a moment with my dad and my daughter, who was 2 years old. She was just getting ready to turn 2 years old. And it was a moment where They were together. It's a moment I'll never forget. My dad went to be with Jesus in November. And, well, just watch this video. You know, until I lost my dad, I hadn't thought much about the condition of our souls. And I'm not talking about whether we're saved or unsaved. I'm talking about the actual condition. Every single one of us has a soul that is being developed for heaven, for glory with Jesus. And I want to ask you today, how alive is your soul? How abundant is your soul? Am I missing out on life and the abundance because I'm believing the lies and I'm chasing the futility of this world, feeling like I'm going to miss out? Or am I all there? Am I present where it matters most? No matter the relationship, be there. Be all there. Because your soul and the soul of the one you're in relationship with is what matters most. Don't miss out on that. Amen.